Good morning, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. My name is Francisco Guajardo. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Museum of South Texas History here in Edinburgh. Today, we want to honor and celebrate and really have a good plática about Preservation Month. This is really about digging deeply into what preservation means and how preservation is being exercised and used locally. And so our point of entry for today, as we have a plática on preservation, is going to be two county clerks from the larger counties in South Texas, at least along the southernmost border. So we will have with us today the county clerk from Hidalgo County and the county clerk from Cameron County. So as they come up, we will do our appropriate and proper introduction. But I have to say that both of these county clerks have been real leaders in this whole idea of preservation. So as you can imagine, wherever you may be sitting or maybe just listening to this, that the whole idea of preservation through government is a very, very important process. This is how we know who was born here, when they were born, who died here, when did they die, who got married here, when did they marry, who bought a piece of land here in 1875. Those kinds of things, I think, are very, very important to really give shape to the story of a community. In this particular case, we're going to try to reconstruct somehow the story of South Texas, specifically through the experiences of two counties and how they are actually working on preservation. So stay with us. When we come back, we will be joined by the county clerk of Hidalgo County. Stay with us. Thank you. All right, so welcome back to Museum Pláticas. So we are joined this morning by, ¿qué somos parientes?
Pues tenemos que ser familia.
But
We're
we
Guajardos.
gotta be, right?
We gotta be related somehow or another.
So
We can find it in the history
we'll
books.
find it in the history book. So Arturo Guajardo is with us today. He is Arturo Guajardo Jr. He is the county clerk of Hidalgo County. And so we're going to talk about preservation here. And and how we do this. But I think that for starters, Arturo, is that so the community. I mean, the community knows you, and the community votes for you, right? And you've got a very successful career, saying to people, "Hey, trust me," and people trust you with their ballots. But tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from. How did you come to be the county clerk? That's got to be an interesting story.
Well, to make a long story short, if you will, I grew up in San Juan. I was born and raised in San Juan, Texas. I anduve correteando barefoot in caliche roads back then, and I went through the PSJA school system. I graduated high school in 1987, went off to the university in Austin, at the UT, came back, also attended UT Pan Am back then. After graduating college, my plans were to go to law school. That's what I had planned. That was my direction. But right away, I met my wife. Now we are the proud fathers or parents of two beautiful daughters. But that kind of was in the way. I remember I had gotten accepted to the Reynaldo Garza School of Law. I said, perfect. Well, that first year I was supposed to start, they shut it down. I said, oh man, so that was an obstacle. Nevertheless, I started working for a local law firm here. A friend of mine that was a lawyer said, look, you want to go to law school? Why don't you come work for me for a little while, get your feet wet, y luego te arrancas. Well, that never happened. I mean, year after year, I me quedé. So I ended up working there 7 years with that law firm. And that law firm was housed out of one of our county buildings, ironically, right across the street from the courthouse. And that is where I met my boss at the county clerk's office, J.D. Salinas, who ended up being county clerk back in the 90s, was working for the county judge back then, Edgar Ruiz. And we would see each other daily there, and I'd help him with some of his, he'd ask me, hey, look over my letters or whatever, and I'd write some stuff for him. I've always been a strong writer. Anyway, fast forward, JD ran for county clerk. He got elected into office, and he calls me up. Hey, you want to come work for me? You can be my chief of staff. And I told him no. I said, no, I don't know about county government, man. I don't know. That's for me. I'm still thinking about law school. No, vente, try it out. Well, lo and behold, I ended up there with him. Got right into it, started learning the whole office about the land records, everything that we were doing there. I was really, really committed to the job. And JD decides to leave. He says, hey, I'm going to run for county judge now. I was like, wait, hold on. We're just getting started here.
So about what time is this?
That was probably in 2004 that he decided to leave, to run. So anyway, I got hired by him in 99. So it was first term in office. Second term, I think, was a term and a half was when he decided to make the jump. So he says, you guys figure it out. Either you run or my other assistant that works there with me now. Either one of you run or figure it out, because I'm gone. So it kind of fell on my lap. I said, you know what? I had told myself I would never run for public office. I had grown up in the political arena. My father had been a past elected official, and I was like, I don't think that's for me. But you can never say never. Now I challenge college students when I go and speak at the university that everybody should try it at least once. Either city council, school board, whatever it is. But anyway, so now I am here 5 terms later. I'm still the county clerk here in Hidalgo County.
Wow. So you first became elected what year?
2007. Yeah.
So when J.D. Salinas says, hey, give it a shot, there's more to where you were in that particular time than just, no, I don't want to do this. I mean, there's more, because you mentioned that you come from a family, or at least your father had been an elected official. There was something in your social DNA, as it were, that gave you some kind of awareness and level of readiness, perhaps, to that. It wasn't just so much, no, not really public office. You had something,
obviously,
in your background. Can you talk a little bit about who's your father, who's your mother, where are they from, that sort of thing?
So both my father and my mother were also born and raised in San Juan. We were all, the same doctor delivered all 3 of us.
Which doctor?
I think it was Dr. Landrum, there at the hospital in San Juan.
How about that?
Yeah. So
what hospital was in San Juan?
We are now building a city hall there. They knocked it down right there on Nebraska, on the main road. 'How about that? Yeah. So that's kind of neat. So my father grew up there. Migrants. Both my parents were migrants, and my father took on the challenge of running for office as city council in his early 20s. Was elected to office, then later became the mayor of San Juan. And I recall the days when I was a kid and we used to go and pass around leaflets. And now that you're saying that perhaps it wasn't my DNA, and my uncles and my father would say, when you go and see the people, you look them straight in the eye and you give them a firm handshake and you tell them what this is about. And, you know, so they were maybe creating what I am today back then without me knowing it. Yeah, so you're probably right.
Well, we saw an example of it before we went on live. There was a lady who works here in the museum who wanted to come say hello to you. She doesn't know you. You don't know her. But when she walked in, you know, con esas atenciones, you stood up and you went, you shook her hand, you looked her in the eye.
Right.
So we have evidence.
Yeah.
But go ahead, continue. So your mom and your dad.
Right. So my mother, they were both from San Juan. They got married at a very early age. My mom is one of 16. Wow. So it was a very large family, and they were migrants. So it was a little bit of
your mother's name?
She's Maldonado, Ermelinda Maldonado. Yeah. So anyway, my father, they eloped and took her on his birthday when they were young, and había problemas en la casa, right? My grandfather did not like my dad for a long time, right? But, le hicieron la lucha. Dad went to school and got educated and started making a life for himself, and the rest is history. He ended up retiring as a superintendent of schools there at PSJA, and, did his 10 years there at the city council. So life has been good.
And how about your mom? What did your mom do?
So my mother became an educator late in life. She only went to like the 6th grade in public school system. And after, we were raising a family, my father got her to go back and get her GED. She got a little bit of schooling, and then she got into the school system as a teacher's aide there. And she spent like 30 years there in the school system. Yeah, so.
But how good a story is that? That your mother would go to the 6th grade, and then your mother would eventually help kids. Whether it's a teacher or teacher's aide, she was actively involved. Yeah, that's possible. That's possible.
It really is. It really
wow.
is. Yeah,
that's a good story.
She tells me that she stopped going to school the day that they asked her to make a speech in class. She was so terrified.
Oh, my God.
And it would remind me of the first times when I got in the political arena and I started making speeches and how terrified I was, to address an audience back then. I said, well, it's in the genes, so I learned to dominate that. I'm a different person now than I was back then.
How about that? So how many years ago did you first run for the district?
It's a county clerk.
County clerk's position.
So I ran in 2006. This is when the election was, and then I got elected, and I took office January 1 of 2007. But I was already at the office.
You were at the office.
I joined the office in 99.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So a dozen years after high school, you're already working with a county clerk, with J.D. Salinas, and you sort of learn the ropes. He teaches you, but other people there are also teaching you, mentoring you, that sort of thing. Tell me how this happens, that the whole history of a clerk, right? I mean, this goes back to ancient times when the clerk was somebody who was a note taker. Right? The clerk sometimes, had a good position. Sometimes they brought slaves to be clerks, and sometimes, like during Roman times, it wasn't like a real elevated position. So it goes up and down in terms of public recognition and honor and that sort of thing. But in the state of Texas, and in modern times, it's a serious position. What's the preparation for that, and how did you become prepared for that as you were working in the clerk's office beginning in 99?
Well, when I was working with that law firm that I was working for, that I joined in 92, I think it was 92 to 99, I worked with them. I worked a lot with the deed records, with the land records, because it was a tax collection law firm of Linebarger, Graham, and Peña, which is very popular throughout the state and now the country. They just concentrate on collecting ad valorem taxes for cities, schools, and counties. So when somebody doesn't pay their taxes, this law firm is responsible for filing a lawsuit on that property on behalf of the taxing entities to force them to pay the debt. And if they don't pay it, eventually they could even sell the property to collect on that debt. Well, the research behind filing all those lawsuits and to find out who the owners are and who's responsible for the taxes to begin with, sometimes you don't even know who's supposed to be paying the taxes, was all at the county clerk's office. So I would visit the county clerk's office and I had to really dive into the deed records and backtrack and go owners to owners to owners based on the maps and what have you to find all of the owners of the land so that we knew that who to be charging the tax bill to. So I spent 7 years of doing that, so I was very familiar with the land records already. So when JD came on, he had no idea what the county clerk's office really did. He just knew he wanted to be in public office. So he says, vente tú, because you know all about this stuff, you know? So it just was kind of like a meant to be type of relationship, and it all worked out.
So there's a couple of questions I have about that. No, number one is that you know a lot of stories about land transfer and land change and that sort of thing. You spent 7 years, and then the last 20 years kind of like digging deeply into some of these things. You're not just, it seems, like an administrator and a public official, but you've also been paying attention a lot to what the substance of these records are.
Sure. You know, well, jumping right into the job, I said, okay, well, what is the responsibility of this position? The county clerk is responsible to be the official record keeper for all of the records in Hidalgo County. So we essentially serve like the librarian, if you will. What kind of records? All the records dealing with the people of the county and all the records dealing with the land in the county, all the property. So we track people from birth and then all the way to death. And if they die, if they leave a will, we all of that gets recorded in our office. And then all of the land records, we go back to the original land grants from Spain, when all the long tracts of land and his property was being sold and what have you. So all of that history is there in the county. And jumping into the preservation side of it, if I may.
Yeah, no, please.
So when we were working there at the very beginning, we see these books were active. I mean, people are doing research there daily. We would have 20 to 30 to 40 people using these books. Everything was in paper format back then in 99, the whole office. Documents in paper form. We had people doing mineral searches, like for if they wanted to drill an oil well or something, they needed to find out who the owners were. So you had a lot of researchers doing that. You had title companies doing research at the courthouse, real estate, different people that were in real estate wanted to get into development. So they were very, very actively being used, these books. And what we recognized right away was a lot of them were falling apart. I even caught lawyers sometimes walking out with a book and say, hey, hold on.
No, wait, go ahead, tell names of lawyers.
I'm not going to disclose them.
No,
I
but
said, hey,
some lawyers were working out.
I said, you cannot be taking that book. That is a permanent record in this county. You know, like some of them go back to the 1800s.
It's a good thing we're not outing people this morning.
Exactly.
But go ahead, continue with the story.
So you know, I started to grasp the size of the responsibility of preserving this history, right? And I said, look, these things, a lot of them are falling apart. We need to do something about fixing these books. I mean, JD and I would have the conversation. So yeah, man, can you imagine how much it's going to cost us just to start repairing? These are old leather books and what have you. I mean, it'd be crazy. So we started just thinking, but at least the thought process began. So we started meeting with some of our legislators. Hey, we got an idea, but we need to fix these books, but we need a funding mechanism. Perhaps you can help us, you know, create a fee that would be designated just to fix these books. Well, Senator Chuy Hinojosa back then was a representative, and he said, you know what, I think you guys are onto something. That's a very, very important thing that you guys want to take on. Let me help you out. So we drafted some legislation, and he basically says, okay, we'll add a fee to the filing of documents. When somebody files a deed record, we'll add a fee to that at the front, so that money that builds you can use to permanently preserve those records.
A piece of legislation only for this county?
Well, initially it was for the whole state of Texas.
For the whole state?
For the whole state.
Yeah, because how can you do it for just
one county? No, it was for the whole state of Texas. So that was the idea, right? Let's do that. So we came up with the language, filed a bill, we take off. Well, the Association of County and District Clerks comes in and says, what are you guys doing over there? No, you're crazy. You can't be doing this. You can't be creating a fee. I said, well, this is our idea. Well, they opposed us.
Really? Because you would think
You
this
would
is
think.
such a good idea.
I know,
I
but
mean, if documents are falling apart in Hidalgo County, they're falling apart in Travis County.
exactly. So their thought process or fear, I think now reflecting back, if you will, at the time was, if you guys were to create some sort of fee like that, maybe we won't get any money from the general fund anymore, because we all get funded through the general fund of the county. So the commissioner's court adopts a budget annually, and they'll give us, everybody gets a piece of the pie, and that is how we operate. Well, this was outside of that. This is a special fee, just is going to be used for county clerks, and they were just, I don't know, they just weren't comfortable with it. So they made their voice heard. They said no.
The association that you're a part of, the
That we are a
association
part
that's
of.
an advocacy association
Right.
for county and district clerks.
They went before the legislature on the floor and
way.
said, and opposed it.
Oh, man.
So we meet with Chewy again, the representative goes, man, your own association, guys, chivas, ¿qué están haciendo? And it was funny because at the time it was our clerk, and it's interesting because Sylvia's going to be here. Her predecessor, Joe Rivera, the county clerk in Cameron, and my former boss, JD, were the two guys in the forefront. But I was with them along, we went to the Capitol. So pasó eso, and they were opposed this. He said, we're not going to give up. Dice representative, this is how we're going to attack this. And he got creative. He goes, we're going to regionalize this bill. I'm going to say that it is for the 13 border counties because it is an economically distressed area. I said, whatever, as long as it works for us. So that's what he said. He changed the language. He said, we're going to do it for an economically distressed area, 13 border counties. Dale. Well, we go, so the next, it makes the committee, the county affairs committee, and it's in their hands. And we went and spoke with the Speaker of the House back then. Pete Laney was his name.
But wouldn't the association continue to oppose it?
Well, now they backed off because now it's only pertaining
It's
to
only
them,
for you
and
guys.
it was
Okay,
kind of a little
okay.
easier now.
Yeah.
So they kind of allowed it.
Okay.
So they looked the other way.
Yeah.
They didn't think we could get it done, I think. So we went to meet with all the Speaker of the House says, go meet with all the committee members, and then you come back to see what they tell you so we can progress the bill. But only one of them opened the door to us. After setting all these meetings up in 2 days that we spent in Austin, we'd get there, someone would wait there. Nothing. Well, only one of them listened to us, Mr. Speaker. We went back and told him, well, that's not very good. So he said, you know what? I want to help you guys. I want to help you. You men, you guys got a good idea. So he gets on the phone right there in front of me. Talk about Politics 101, a lesson for me for how the legislature works. Hey, so-and-so, I know you had a meeting with these boys from South Texas and you didn't get to meet with them. Well, I noticed that you have House Bill 39, whatever, is over here stuck on this committee. If you want that thing to move, I think you need to meet with these guys. Yes, sir, send them right over. Well, he went like that one by one, opened the door for us.
Wow.
Well, at the end, the thing gets passed. So, to jump all the way to the end. So the thing gets passed, the bill gets passed, and we start collecting that money. Well, now we had the money to start doing some of this work,
So what kind of money are we talking about here?
$5 on a document. So we started raising probably $600,000 a year.
And this is basically being raised regionally, right? I mean, people from here are actually putting up that money through.
So it was carefully monitored. The way the bill was written back then, it would be to be used for automation, restoration, and preservation of the county's historic deed records, the official records, which are all of the books in our possession. So every year we would have to present a plan to the county commissioner's court, and they would decide whether yes, you're following the laws the way it was written, and then they would authorize us to collect that fee that was going to be used specifically for that. So it was that we did that annually. So it was carefully being supervised, if you will.
So Hidalgo County is putting it into operation. Our Cameron, Willacy, Star.
No one else knew what was going on. 2 years passed by, and the rest of the counties, what are you guys doing?
But it was a law.
Collect it, guys. Collect it.
They could.
Trust me. Go to your commissioner's court. Follow the steps. So then everybody started coming. Well, how do we do it? And how do we do this? How do we do that? Well, so we get the jump start on the whole state.
And a lot of this is really the brilliance of Chuy Hinojosa.
Yes, his creativity.
But
to
it's
get it
also the seed was planted by you or JD.
Or us having the
you guys-
vision to begin with.
So now
And wanting to do this.
And you guys doing this, so this is what year? 99, 2000?
2000.
Okay. You guys doing this, what is the macro landscape at the moment, at that time? Because I'm guessing you're going to conferences of this association, maybe. Like this next one's going to be in June next month here in McAllen for the first time in the Valley, or in McAllen at least. So what were the conversations like statewide, or even, at a national level, around the preservation of documents? Were people talking about preserving?
Not really.
Really?
No, not really. And most of the people that had been there were in the clerk's positions. JD and I would laugh and we'd make jokes. Oh, here we go to another meeting with all the blue-haired ladies, because it was amazing. They had been there for a long time. And if I would talk to a clerk from another part of the state about trying to do, why would we change that? It's working just fine. Leave it alone.
Paper's fine.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Did you tell them I got a lawyer walking out with he didn't say,
or ripping out a page instead of paying $1 a page. Hold on, wait a minute.
My God! Wow. Well, okay, so you're laying out this story that's a very important story that very likely nobody's heard before.
I've told it to a few of the clerks that are now benefiting from that.
We
did back then, but
like in preservation circles, that's a gem of a story. I gotta tell you, that's like an award-winning story. You take that, and then, because it wasn't only the legislation, the resource that happened as a result, but now we have data of 20 plus years of actual preservation.
Oh yes.
In fact, Exhibit A.
Right.
Aquí.
This is the first Commissioner's Court book from 1852 from Hidalgo County. That was literally falling apart, disintegrating.
So there's the actual tangible copy, but then there's also the digitization process, of scanning and organizing, cataloging, and then posting. So all of this is online.
Sure, it's all now online. Because
Come on, what a gift.
So when we decided to take this job on, so the first thing we had to do was, well, how can we fix the books if they're being used every day? I can't take them away from the public. They're public record. So we came up with a plan. Well, we need to put them in digital format. We need to start scanning them.
Arturo, we're looking at, this is a 2007 image. Look, this is not sure what year this would be, but I think that you can probably place it chronologically. We're looking at the warehouse, right? And so I don't know if these are historical photographs. Probably are, right? What is it that? Oh, so this is today.
That's today. The way, in comparison to the way a lot of the records were being kept at the San Carlos warehouse, which had a leaky roof and what have you. So they're shredding some of those documents. Those are the original plats there that you're looking at in the plat cabinets.
Wow. Huh. So go ahead.
So back to what I was. So we needed to first scan the books so that we could provide people with a copy on the side that they could be using while we're working on the actual books. And that was very difficult, if you will, when somebody's so used to researching these books. If you take, I had a landlady there. They're called landmen, the people that do the research for the land, for the minerals and what have you. Was a lady there. Where are you taking the books? No, are you crazy? Where are you taking the books? Literally yelling off the top of her lungs. But it was difficult to explain. Look, we're going to fix the books, but here's another copy in digital format. It's the exact same thing. People had a difficult time to adjust to that. But anyway, fast forward from 2000 to 2010. That's how long it took us to scan all of these books.
But you scanned all of them?
Over 900 million images.
No way.
That was a huge,
and so
huge
who
task.
did the actual physical work of it? You must have contracted
So we had to contract out and outsource some to some of the title company. So one of the title companies had a large segment already that they had done. So we put the pencil to it and said, we'll just buy this piece from them instead of us doing it. Y así no le vamos, just kind of putting it together. And we were outsourcing and managing, and like 3 different entities were doing it for us. And once we got all the scanned images in place, then the next thing was to index them. We had to go back and create an index for all of those images to where people can just punch in Francisco Guajardo and they would pull up your deed. And we couldn't misspell Francisco or else people would never find it, right? So that,
But what if originally it was misspelled? Then you have to misspell it yourself.
if it's
because
the way the
the
record
way
is
it is
kept is the
original.
way we have to keep it. That's correct.
That's why it's so important to
That's
spell
correct.
it right the first
So
time.
we triple key verified the
Okay.
indexing.
Okay.
So 3 different people were doing the same entry at 3 different locations throughout the state of Texas to minimize errors on the indexing portion of it. So we finally finished with all of that. Once we finished with all of that, putting together everything in digital form, now we just put computers in the back room where people were used to using books, and now they were researching on the computers. Now we could take the books, take them off site, and do the necessary work that needed to be done to them. And that took us the next 10 years to accomplish.
Wow.
So through today, we redid about 7,000 of these books. 7,000 of these books. I mean, and it's very labor intensive. They basically take the whole book apart. Each page is put in a wet solution to deacidify the pages, to remove all the human oils, and then encapsulate it in a mylar, and then being put back together.
You sound like an archive
Like an archivist, right?
professional, yeah.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like I
Yeah.
became one watching the whole thing before
Hey,
my eyes.
words that you thought like, they're not part of my vocabulary before
Exactly.
now. Deacidify. Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow,
it was
this is
pretty,
great.
pretty neat to see.
So you go through this whole education process yourself personally, right? But it's like great professional development for you and people in your office.
absolutely.
How many people do you oversee in the clerk's office?
We've got a team of 87 working for the county
87.
clerk's office.
Wow. And so I'm guessing that those range from clerical, which is where the clerk comes from, right, to like high end, well, you
Sure,
are
we've got
the
managerial
public official.
staff. They're all deputy clerks.
You're the only one who's elected.
That is correct.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that is elected. So by being elected county clerk, there are certain responsibilities and authorities that are provided to me by the laws of the state of Texas. So every employee that I bring in, that we hire, I have to officially deputize them. They take an oath of office, and by me deputizing them, that's why they're called deputy clerks. That gives them all of the authorities and powers to authenticate and certify legal instruments and what have you. I'm giving those responsibilities to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go on break here just a little bit, and then I want to come back to see how it is that this comes to life, because there's stories in there. Yeah,
Oh, there's some valuable history
in the
there.
millions of actual, images, right, that have been taken. There's got to be some real gems there, and so let's get into some of those when we come back. Okay.
Absolutely.
So so this is about to get real juicy. Not thinking that, but with caution. But when we come back, we're gonna get into some of the stories here that Arturo Guajardo and his staff over at the Hidalgo County Clerk's Office have found through the years. And so I think that the stories are so important, because the stories are really what give us, like the narrative of the region, the identity of the region, and kind of help us to understand, who we are in many ways. So stay with us, okay? Thank you.
one,
Right.
or what position would people be
Right.
in, so.
So that you have. Okay, welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. Francisco Guajardo, CEO of the museum, with Arturo Guajardo, the county clerk from Hidalgo County. So we're going to have I think, a shorter segment, although, when I say shorter, I want to take it back almost immediately because short, like maybe in a
right.
biblical way. But so we talked first about Preservation Month. This is a national thing. Then we got into talking about Arturo Guajardo's biography and how he moved into the county clerk's office. And then he told this story that's, I think, a riveting story of how, as I'm understanding it, that local people, South Texas people, would really, I think, push the issue of the preservation of Commissioner's Court documents, but also a much more expansive offering of documents that then becomes kind of engineered through legislation. And so what we have here is one book. This is the 1852 Commissioners Court notes, right? Minutes and notes. And so what you guys have done out of your office, and so you've been a county clerk now for 20 years, you say. And so you are in what part of your most recent term right now?
I'm in the first year of my 5th term.
Of your 5th term. So during this time, the county has invested a lot of resource into doing this, not only here as we see it tangibly, but also in the digitization process so that the public, the world can actually go see this document, right? That may be, and as we were on break, I said, let me just open this, right? And I opened it, and I'm not even trying hard, is what I said. It says it's a document from 1861 that says that Hidalgo County, the Confederate States of America.
Wow, you don't hear that anymore.
In 1861, right, as the South went Confederate, it shows up in the documents here in Hidalgo County. It's right across the street and also online. What story do you want to share about you overseeing this process of preservation, archiving as well? What's the one story that you think, wow, you know what I learned through this? Like, I learned this, and it's in the document, so you can go see it.
Well, in diving into this project, we learned a lot of things along the way. One, that the states of the laws, the laws of the state of Texas were still very antiquated with respect to us going forward and moving forward with digitization, because all of the costs associated with the public record were on paper. So people would come and buy a document. It was $1 a page at the courthouse all day long. But now that we had it in digital format, well, what are we supposed to charge for it? Nobody could, what made common sense to us, well, how many bytes or megabytes it takes to one page, and maybe that's how we could do it. Well, that didn't go very far. And we went back and forth with the state's General Services Commission. At the time, the lady heading that was Hadassah Skloss. And her and I had a lot of discussions as to how we were supposed to move forward with doing this. So that was one thing. But more importantly, when we were able to put everything in digital format, the way that we were now able to provide access to these records that were filed at the courthouse was much simpler. Now, hey, send me an email or shoot me a copy or send me a whole book. Or then I thought about putting it online. I said, what if we put it online? Now we can get rid of all these people that are driving to the courthouse every day. So we put it online. We said, what do we charge for it? Well, you know what? People, in our thoughts, people already paid for it up front. So let's just give it to them for free. So now, all of a sudden, what our forefathers said was to be a public record open to the public, I don't think that they ever imagined that meant the whole world. Because now it's online for the whole world to see.
www.
There it is. All of the records of Hidalgo County that, what you're going through on this, you could do it from home. And you could access it now. So it was almost scary at a time, too. Like, hold on, we got a box. I mean, are we sure we want the whole world? Well, it's out now. Is that the right thing to do or not? What if somebody from the Middle East starts plotting, bombing a gas line? We don't know. So for a time, we got into the GAO for the federal government.
Let me
go ahead.
pause. Is there anything that's inherently vulnerable about this area here? It being, or say where Sylvia, who we're going to have on in a bit, where there is this repository of public records. Is there any danger with that? Like when somebody looks for like strategic places, let's say, and not that I'm encouraging any kind of
right.
But here, is there any?
I wouldn't think so. But still, if you want to open your mind up to it, if somebody, a terrorist, wants to do something with these documents, they could try to do identity theft, recreate a person that perhaps died, or make false instruments that you are this person once you see that this person owns a lot of property, or the sky's the limit if your
Right.
mind thinks wrong. So you just never know the things that they're out there. Other safeguards need to be adopted
Right,
by the
right.
legislature to protect that.
I see. Yes, yes. Wow. Yeah, it becomes complex.
It really does.
I mean, if we wouldn't ask these questions, say, 20, 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, but not 30, 40 years ago. This is a whole new age.
It really is.
Wow. So you opened it up to the world. You made that decision.
We did.
Yeah. How many years ago did you make that decision?
Well, that was when we first put it out there was in 2010 or 10 around there.
Okay. 13, 14 years later, anything...
Nothing.
So it's all good.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty
okay.
much.
Okay. I mean, the fact that you have this online.
There's been so today's records that are recorded in the official records. If you have a Social Security on your deed, the law requires you to put a statement at the top. Hey, that I know that my Social Security on there. In other words, it's warning you not to put it out there because people are going to see it. But no Social Security numbers are shared nowadays. But the older documents have Social Securities on them. Some of them. So now there's laws in place that require me to redact that Social Security number if you come and tell me to. Then I can redact it. But if you don't come and tell me to, then it still might be out there.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you, Pam, if you can go back to the video you were showing, I just want to make a point of that the reason that we at the museum were kind of led to your office and now also Sylvia's office is because we've been engaged here at the museum with people from across the country who are doing some real trailblazing work on establishing kind of the triangulating the data sets around the Underground Railroad that came through South Texas. So in the time right before the Civil War, and even into the Civil War, where freedom seekers who were enslaved, called runaway slaves, came through here to go into Mexico in search of freedom, because Mexico had abolished slavery by 1829. So if you were a slave in Central Texas or in Houston, do you want to go up to the Mason-Dixon line, with the Harriet Tubmans of the world? Or can you just go south 250, 300 miles? And so the record shows that it could have been anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 runaway slaves that came into Mexico. It's a fascinating story.
Sure.
That when we grow up, in American schools, we don't learn about. But what we're finding is that through family stories, because there's at least 2 families down here that created kind of like outposts on the Underground Railroad, right on the river. 2 families that came from Central Texas, one of them, the other one from Alabama, the Jacksons and the Webbers. So we were very curious to see what is it in the county clerk's office, in the records. So I took a team in the last few months, and so you had just come to the museum to do a tour, and actually you brought your whole staff to sort of become immersed in the history, right? And so we had a great time with that. And so then you invited us to go, and so we went. And the footage that you're seeing there is, a recent visit there where we actually found that John Weber bought the piece of land in 1853. And we find how John Weber actually got a license to operate a ferry. And the family stories say that John Weber ferried runaway slaves into Mexico.
Wow. Isn't that interesting?
In no way we know that story if we don't see it.
If you didn't find it.
If we didn't find it here.
Sure. And that's what it's all about, to preserve that history. Because if this book would have disintegrated and the ink would have continued to develop until it disappeared off the pages, then it's gone forever.
Wow.
Unless somebody else had something notes about it.
Do you sometimes think about how valuable the work has been in the last 20 plus years for you?
I reflect on it.
Yeah?
I'm proud of the fact that we took this on because we didn't have to. In county government, for us to do something like this, there has to be a law that exists that allows us to do it. So we fought for the law to give us that authority, or else it would have never gotten done. So yeah, I'm proud of the fact that we did it because it needed to be done.
Yeah.
And now I like seeing that the rest of the state of Texas followed suit, and they're all doing it as well.
Yeah.
So before we know it, everyone will have their records preserved.
There's one line of thinking that suggests that Todo sale del valle.
No sé si todo, pero muchas cosas.
But, and we can just follow that kind of strand of thinking that a lot of like good stuff, like picking crops de aquí del valle, a lot of ingenuity sale del valle. I mean, not only is the valley the crossroads, Hidalgo and Cameron County, of course, is important pillars of that. Not only is it the crossroads to the Americas, but there's so much that has been exported out of the valley in terms of human capital, but also intellectual capital.
Sure.
This, to me, is one very specific example of how we can say, you know what, there were people down in South Texas who thought of this, and during a time that it may have been unpopular, they thought of the idea but persisted.
Right.
Y lo mira, and not in a very long time either.
Doc, and I'm proud of the fact that we were able to do that and leave it all in some type of uniformity, because prior to this, I could actually see the gaps of when a county clerk had changed. I said, pues, ¿qué pasó from this book to this book? Now it's like different. And now and then another break in the chain, another break, not in the chain of title, but in the way records were being kept. And it was just changes of administration. So we were basically able to clean all that up and make it now a seamless, very usable from A to Z. I mean, from 1852 all the way to current now.
In the context of Hidalgo County.
In the context of Hidalgo County.
Would another county, Willis County, would they keep their records in? Is there a common template for everybody?
No. No. And it comes with the fact that, there's vendors out there that'll help you accomplish your work at the office. And if some county's using one vendor and another one is using another, and then there's differences in the way they do things. And you can see that if you're a historian, you come and try to access all these records, you'll see that they're not uniform throughout the whole history of the county. So it's been been interesting.
Poco a poquito.
Poco a poquito.
Wow,
exactly.
This is great. What a story. What a story. And now that I think that at least from my perspective and my colleagues' perspective, we just documented that story.
Really?
We just recorded it.
Yes.
It's
And now you can have that story
it's
there
in
as
our
well.
archive, and so I think many more stories to come.
I'll share one other thing
Yes.
before I lose that train of thought. So a lot of people don't realize that the records that are kept at the county clerk's offices throughout the whole country is really the basis of the economic strength of our country. Hernandez Soto wrote a book that's called The Mystery of Capital, where he shares with the world on why is the United States economy so strong. And it ends up going back to the basis of it is because of how good we keep our land records. So when you go to the bank and you go and borrow money on a piece of property and they give you what's called a deed of trust, he's trusting you that you're going to pay him back. But it's not 100% based on trust. That banker knows that record it's recorded at the county clerk's office is accurate and that there's no other person that owns interest in that, only me, because I'm lending you the money. So that comfort zone provides for a very comfortable economic prosperity for the country, and people don't realize the importance of this.
Wow.
Other countries, you'll search in the histories and where people will just go burn all the land records, and now what? Now I'm the owner. Think about that.
Yeah. Wow. That's a compelling wisdom there. Gotta chew on that. Was there any other story that you wanted to share?
Stories in there are
Okay. So that's for another plática.
That's for another one.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Arturo, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invite, Doc.
So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go on break. And so right after the break, we're gonna have Sylvia Garza-Perez from Cameron County. She is a county clerk of a neighboring county. And so we're gonna get into, talk about who she is, how she got to the position, and then what it is that Cameron County does in terms of preservation. So stay with us, and we will be back here in a couple minutes. Welcome back to Museum Pláticas, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. Francisco Guajardo here with you. And so we have a second guest today on this Preservation Month Museum Plática. And so Sylvia, how about if you introduce yourself to the world?
To the world.
Yeah, you've probably been online, doing talks and that sort of thing.
Not really, but I will.
You're kind of a big deal down in the Lower Valley, no?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
So tell us who you are, Sylvia. Where you come from? How you
yeah.
got to this position in life.
Well, I got to this position in life by accident. I will tell you that. I'm just started my first year of my third term. I was elected back in 2014. I became the first female elected to this position since Cameron County was created back in 1848.
Whoa. Wow.
It's all been men.
Huh.
The longest sitting county clerk was there for 41 years. The second longest sitting clerk was there for 36 years, which was my predecessor, Joe G. Rivera. And then it was me.
Wow. So who was the 40-something year person? Do you remember?
Don't ask me off the top of my head. But
okay. No more tough questions.
Nah, that's a tough one.
Okay.
All I know is they're all men, and
Yeah.
I probably have my picture in between all the guys that are on the wall. So, yes. I'm originally from Brownsville, born and raised. My family grew up in a little community called San Pedro, which is outside off of Highway 281, Military Highway.
Is that where the old church is?
Yes,
San Pedro?
yes.
My cousin was the priest of that church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you go to that church by chance? Or?
I go to visit. I go to
Okay.
visit once in a while, or when the church has activities. So I go support their fundraisers.
Okay.
But that's where my family is from. My maternal family, my father's paternal family. My paternal family is originally from Mexico, but my mom's family originally came. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was from Mexico. I'm not too sure exactly the community, but my maternal grandfather was from Soto La Marina.
Oh, yeah.
And my great-grandfather also came from that area. And he was one of the original vaqueros that worked under Wallace Reed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I told your staff when they went to visit my office the other day that he was more bow-legged than a wishbone. Never learned how to drive. He rode a horse until he died.
How old was he when he died?
He was about 80-something years old.
You got to know him well?
Yes.
Did he? I know we're going off on another story, but it's a good story. I think. Was your grandfather in a lot of pain later in life with his legs?
Yes.
Yeah. Such is the case for a lot of old vaqueros.
Yes, he could barely walk towards the end, but he was a typical, what you would say, a typical vaquero. Wore his Wrangler shirt, and smoked buglers.
Wow. And drove a pickup truck, no?
No, he never drove. He never
never drove.
He never learned how to drive. Puro caballo.
Wow.
Puro caballo. So if he needed to go somewhere, he'd ask somebody to take him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About that.
Yes.
What part of Brownsville did you grow up in?
Mostly in San Pedro, and then towards the latter years, towards the area that's outside, closer to SpaceX, over there by the airport in that area.
So in San Pedro, was there an elementary school there in San Pedro?
Yes, it's been there forever.
What's the name of the
It's
school?
Villanueva Elementary. It's been there since, God, I don't know how long it's been there.
And that's part of the Brownsville.
It's part of Brownsville BISD. Yeah,
It was not.
it was not before.
What was it?
I think it was like one of the county schools. If I'm
Okay.
not, I haven't really checked the history on that, but I think it was one of the county schools because it was out of the outskirts of the city.
And you went to high school in Brownsville.
Yes,
Which high school?
Hannah High School.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. How was that?
it was fun. I
Yeah.
loved it. I loved high school. I enjoyed it.
And so, what are the names of your parents?
My mother is Juanita Zárate Garza. My father is Manuel Gomez Garza.
Okay. And what did they do for a living?
My father worked for years with Marathon Eternal, and then when they got divorced, he moved away to California, and I didn't really keep in touch with him after that. But my mother was very involved in the community, did a lot of political involvement,
Really?
and that's how I got started in politics. She was very community oriented. When we were small, we were migrant workers, so we would go and work. We worked up in Washington State, picking apples and other stuff, and then from there we would go to California, and we worked in the fields picking oranges, peaches, walnuts. Trying to think anything else. And then in the valley, we worked picking okra and cotton.
So would your father go with you, or this was after?
No, they were still together, so we traveled. When we left Brownsville, I was about 5 years old. We went to go live in a town called Moses Lake, Washington, and we worked on a apple farm. My father and my mother both worked for him. It was a Japanese owner that was there. He had an apple farm, so we used to pick apples. And so the way they would do it is that around the apple tree, they dug a hole, so the apples, when they would fall, they would go in, and then we would go in and pick the ones that were good and then throw the ones that weren't away, which my mother really used to make applesauce or make apple pies. When they were that good, she'd clean them up and cook for us. But we worked there, and then we moved from there to California, and we lived in Tulare County, in Tulare City, and we worked there, peaches, oranges, walnuts, grapes.
And so how long were you, how many years, and this is in the valley, right, in the Yakima Valley?
Yes.
Where you were, and so how long were you in the Yakima Valley?
We came back, I think, when I was barely starting my 4th grade year of school.
So you were there a couple years?
Yeah.
And then in California, another couple
In Washington and in California, and then we came back to the valley because my mom missed her mom. I missed my grandmother. I was very close to her. And so we came back and we stayed here ever since. We've been here ever since.
So, what, the 1st through the 4th grade, you were in the West Coast? Por allá, más o menos?
Enjoyed it.
Did that do anything to your, like, language development, speech patterns,
yes.
kinds of things?
Very much so.
Like
when
what?
I first left the valley, I did not speak any English at all. I spoke pure Spanish. So when I got to Washington State, it was like I was in a foreign country. So I ran away from school one day, and everybody was looking for me because I told my mother, I don't know what I told her in Spanish, no sé pa' qué me mandas ahí, esa señora habla chino. Pero she was speaking English to me, and I didn't know what she was saying. I didn't like her.
It was Chinese to you.
It was Chinese to me as far as I knew. And so then from there...
But hang on, because that's a good story. So what do you mean you ran away from school? Like
I just walked
you're
out
like
of
a
class.
7-year-old kid.
I left. I walked out. I was like, I didn't want any part of it. I was not going to sit there and listen to this lady.
But you went outside in front of the
and I
schoolhouse?
started walking.
You went through the sidewalk, like,
I walked out of the school. I walked out of the school and I was walking. And so funny because it was actually snowing that day. I'd never been exposed to snow, but I had a coat on. And I just walked out and went on my own merry way. I had no idea where I was going. What I remember as a kid was when my mother found me, I'm sitting on an embankment on the corner of a street on snow, and I'm just there sitting, And my mother comes and she's like crying and all hysterical. Where were you? What'd you do? And I was like, I didn't want to listen to that lady. I didn't like her. I didn't know what she was telling me. I didn't want to be there, so I walked out. And my mother's like, you could have been lost. Something could have happened to you. And I looked at her and I said, well, I'm okay.
How old were you?
I was little.
Six?
Probably about 6 years old. Yeah. So my mother told me, long story short, since that moment, you've always done whatever you wanted to do. It's true.
Well, I mean, if you sort of unpack that story, what does it say about, like, the personality and the character of the child when the child is so, like, emboldened and courageous to walk out of what's supposed to be a safe environment, to go out into you don't know what environment that is outside, but
No,
you did it.
But I did it, yeah.
Oh my God.
So I think, I'm going to tell you, I've had a lot of language barriers growing up. I had a really hard time with school, learning to read and learning to communicate and learning to get people to understand me. But when I finally could, it was like a light of bolting hit my brain and went, and every circuit in my brain just lit up, and it hasn't stopped since. So,
Do you tell that story of it as a child? Like, you've told it in public before?
yes, I have.
But you tell it because it has meaning for
Yes.
you as a public servant.
Yes,
So
it
explain
does.
that.
In my current job right now, I have a great opportunity to reach out to many people, especially young children, and talk to them about what our office does, what our job is all about. And one of the things I share with the students when I go to the schools is, in my office, I keep a book that tells me a story about you, just like the story that I have. And so when I talk to them, they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean you have a story? I said, well, my story is when I was going to school, I could not speak English. I could not read English. So I had to learn. And it wasn't until I was in the 3rd grade going into the 4th grade that I finally went to a store and I started to sound out words and I knew what they said. And so the light came on. And ever since then, I found it interesting and I found it challenging to try and learn as much as I could. And so when you feel like you can't learn, that's what I share with the children, always know that there's a light bulb that's going to go on. At some point in your life, it's going to come on and you're going to say, oh, that's what they were talking about. That's what they were trying to tell me. So every day that you live is a story in your book. I keep that story that tells me when you were born, when you bought a house, when you got married, or when you got married, when you bought a house. And if you get in any trouble, I'll have that history too. And when the day you leave this world, we'll close the book and we'll file it away in case anybody else wants to come and read it. They'll find all out about you.
What kind of an organizer was your mother?
My mother was a very hardworking woman, very bent, very strong, bent on us learning, going to school, learning to read and write, and learning in her own little way. I don't really know why, but she really wanted us to learn about the arts. Very interesting to me that she would do that, but she had a 6th grade education. She got her GED when she was about 60 years old, about same age I am right now. And
There's no way you're 60.
yeah.
No.
Seven children. I told her, mother, you must have never watched TV in your life. But anyway, she pushed all of us to go to school. All of us.
Your mother earned a GED when she was 60 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So tell that story. Like, how did that happen? What was the motivation, inspiration, and execution of that?
I think that along her life, she worked so much with the public. She was a big advocate for people that were underprivileged. She was a big advocate for people who couldn't speak or understand English. And she loved to interpret. She'd like to find out ways to help them. And I think that's why she got involved in helping people run for office and be involved. When we lived in California, she worked for a program called Meals on Wheels with a lady, an African-American lady named Nora Wallace. That's all I remember. But I remember her personality because she was very outspoken and she encouraged my mother a lot to come out of her shell. And so her and that lady, Nora Wallace, traveled to the capital of California to go and protest some things that were being withheld from the elderly, which were rights and programs. And they went and protested on the Capitol steps in Sacramento when Ronald Reagan was the governor of California. Why she did that, I just know the story because I would hear when they would come over to our house and they would sit and talk. I would hear what they were doing or what they were planning. I didn't actually go there, but I know they did it. And I know that it helped them open up more services for the seniors when they were in California. And ever since then, she was involved in all that. And then she came back to Texas and started working. And she worked for a program here in the Valley called Amigos del Valle. She worked for them for about, I'd say almost 18 years until she got sick and she stopped working.
How old is your mother now?
Well, she passed away. She's been gone for 24 years already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, miss her all the time.
Remind me your mother's name?
Juanita. Well, her real name was Juana Carmen Zárate Garza. The ugliest name, I always tell her mother, I don't like your name, but everybody calls
Wait,
Juanita.
hang on. What's
I don't like-
Carmen, those are good, strong names.
I know, but I was like, why did they call you Juana? Why couldn't they name you San Juanita or Juanita Maria? I don't know.
But Juana is like Juana Gallo.
She
like
was
the
like
fierce Mexican, like Adelita Revolucionaria. That's your mother.
Yeah, she named her. She was named after one grandmother and the other grandmother. So she had both her maternal and paternal grandmother names.
She had two good, strong Mexican women names.
Yes. And then she named me Sylvia. Where she got that name is beyond me. She says a friend of hers says that she can name me after her. I don't know.
Okay.
I never really asked my mom why she named me Sylvia.
Wow. Yeah. I'm very taken by your mother's story. I have to say, that when somebody organizes like for Meals on Wheels or organizes for Amigos del Valle, I mean it's all for people who are good, strong people and have their own sense of privilege. They just don't have some kind of voice. And so your mother seems to be a person who was very active with that. So
She also got to meet Cesar Chavez when she was in California.
really,
And she got to work with him out in the camps where they were going to, bring up, talk to people about the rights that they had and that they needed them to speak up on what was happening in the fields with the fumigation of the vegetables and the fruits and how they were being exposed to that, their shelter, their homes, all that. I was a kid. I just remember some stories and some. I'm the eldest of 7 children. I kind of remember them. I'm the one that kind of shares them with my brothers. I don't remember all the facts, but I do remember bits and pieces. But she was very, I think she was, had she had more education and more training, she could have been something.
she would have been like right next to Dolores Huerta in La Lucha.
Yeah, she was,
Yeah.
she was a strong advocate for people, and she always tried to make sure that everybody had what they needed and what they needed and what they deserved. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that as a kind clerk, you have become your mother?
A little bit. A little bit. I think so. A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people tell me you're just like your mother, in a different little way. But yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I don't know how much of it you heard from Arturo, who went right before you, but he traces, his own like social DNA, right? Of, at the lap of his father, sort of learning about public service and that sort of thing. It sounds like a very similar story for you that you would have. But to be fair, you do describe it as I remember some of that, maybe not the specifics, but you remember enough.
Yeah.
So that you were able to be kind of imbued with this spirit of this woman who was your mother.
Yes.
Yeah, very inspirational.
Very. She was a person, I think, ahead of her times. I mean, she grew up in a large family. She had a very difficult marriage, and she ended up raising 7 children by herself. And to have someone with all the odds working against you, to push your children to graduate from high school, graduate from college, and be very successful men and women, I think that's a lot to her legacy. She was an underdog when she started, and she did a lot of things. I wish she was here. She would be very amazed that her daughter's an elected official.
But she never saw it. She
She
never
never
saw
saw
you
it.
cutting clear. But,
She never
but
saw
why
it.
would she be amazed?
I think because she helped so many people. I don't think she ever thought that any of us would pursue something like this.
Public service.
Yes. I mean, she would always tell us, you need to help. You need to, make sure that when you see someone needing something, help them. Be kind to people. Be humble. Remember where you came from. The same Hispanic traditions that our family. No se te olvide de dónde veniste y quién eres. Those are the things my mother taught us. But like I was telling you earlier, she had a really, I don't know, I don't remember my grandparents being like that. And I don't think anybody else that I know in the family, but my mother was very interested in the arts. I don't know why, but she would have us sit down on the table. We had to practice how we wrote our names. We had to practice coloring and using different colors to be different. And always, when you're coloring, you're going to stay in the line, but you want to make it look real, like it's beautiful. And she would make us use color and use our imagination and create different things out of stuff. She would teach us how to make food out of almost anything without any recipes. And to me, it was fantastic because I always got something to eat, but she did that. And then for me to learn my English, My mother had a small record player. She would buy me Christmas album, and probably I know every Christmas song because she would play them for me over and over.
Like Bing Crosby and those,
Yes,
or what?
yes.
Really?
And I
But
learned.
not in Spanish.
They were all in English.
So you could learn English.
And I didn't know what I was saying. I just learned them. So the first one I learned in English was Silent Night, because my mom taught it to me. And then she taught it to me in Spanish so that I could understand that there was a communication link between both languages. I was like, okay. Now I see that. When I was a kid, I was like, why do I have to learn this, mother? But
Your mother was so ahead of her time.
yeah, she was. And so I have a game that I play with my grandchildren, my granddaughters especially. I tell them every Christmas they have to learn a Christmas carol. And they're like, which one do we learn? I said, I don't know, y'all pick one. So they try to find the easy ones because the hard ones are too much.
Like
for them.
Feliz Navidad.
Yeah, they love that one. That's her favorite.
That was her first one.
That's her favorite. That was my mom's favorite too. But they like that one because it's easy for them to learn. But if you give them like the First Noel or Joy to the World, they're like, some of those words, they just don't even know what it means. But yeah, mom would make us listen to music. So we learned to like music. Some of my brothers were in choir, in band. I have a brother who's an art teacher, very good art teacher. So we all have a little bit of that. I think it's important because it kind of develops your brain to be a little bit linguistic in not only the English language or the Spanish language, but also understanding the arts, because they give you, I think, an upper level of thinking and seeing things through different eyes. It's my personal thought.
So much. to say, I think.
Pregúntame.
No,
Tell me
no.
what you want to know.
Well, I'm trying to understand
Who I am?
like the foundation, and so I have a sense, right, of how it is that, this little child would walk out of school because of a frustration over language. It would be, about an act of courage. So to me, like, I would think that your mother would not be surprised, because your mother would have seen the courage of you as a young child. Now, maybe doing it through this, maybe, right, but that would have been expressed in some way as a full-grown woman. She probably would not be that surprised. But that's just me guessing. You said that this happened by accident, the county clerk thing. What does that mean? What's that story?
I never had any inclination of running for office. I was probably, before I ran for the county clerk position, I had was very involved in the political party, and so at a meeting, somebody mentioned something. I said, "Well, why don't we do this?" They're like, "Oh no, you can't do that." I'm like, "Why not?" They're like, "No, because this is the way we do things, and this is the way." I was like, "Well, we need to change things because obviously we're not doing any better." And they said, "No." I said, "Well, what if I ran for this position?" So I actually ran the first time for Democratic Party chairman. And I ran against two men. It was me and two men, and I ended up winning and was there for 2 years. And then again, somebody told me, "You can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't." And I was like, "Why can't you all? Why is it that?" So then I decided I was going to run for another position. And Mr. Rivera, who was the county clerk at that time, came and talked to me. He says, "Wait, I want to run for that position. I want to make a deal with you." I said, "Well, what's the deal?" Being the woman that I am, I was like, "Why do I have to make a deal with you?" And so we talked, and he actually...
Did you tell him, look, I walked out of class when I was 6 years old?
No, I didn't tell him
You
that.
didn't tell him that?
No, but I did tell him. I said, "I don't know. I have to think about it." So he kind of called me for about 2-3 months, trying to restart the conversation. And so, because my mom knew him and my mom had been friends with him for a long time, I sat down and I talked to him, and he,
Out of respect.
and I do have a lot of respect for him, a lot of respect for him. He was a great mentor, a great individual, a great person, a great man, did a lot for the county. And sitting down with him, he talked to me and told me this. I said, "You know what, Mr. Rivera? Okay, you run for that position, and then I'll run for your position." And he goes, "I'll help you." I said, "Okay, fair's fair." And I said, but we're gonna work together, right? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, we're gonna both be, yes, we're gonna do everything together, okay. So as we're starting to campaign, both of us, like I said, it was by accident because I had no intention of running for this. But he said, okay, we're gonna work together, okay. So we started going to campaign stuff, and I'm very hyper. I'm just naturally hyper. I would tell him, okay, we're gonna go here. We're gonna be there 15 minutes, then we're gonna leave, say goodbye, and we're gonna go to the next place. And then after that, we're gonna say hellos, talk to people, shake hands, and we're going to the next place. I think by the third place that we had been to, he's like, óyeme, ponle las manillas, ya me cansaste. So I was used to doing 3, 4, 5 events and going to different places and talking to people, shaking hands and, trying to get my message out there while I was running, right? And when the election came, he lost, I won, and I've not stopped since then, because every time I talk to people, they tell me, oh my God, I saw you in Harlingen in the morning, and then you were in McAllen in the evening, and then I saw you over here. I'm just a very hyper person.
What year was that?
That was in, when I got elected was 2014, and I took office in 2015.
How many votes did you get that first time?
Oh, there was 5 of us that ran, so we did a runoff. I was the top vote getter on the first race. Then in the runoff, it was me and another gentleman, and I beat him. I don't remember, it was a little over maybe, I would say about 2,000 votes or something like that. And then I've had an opponent every year I've run.
Really?
Yeah. And then this year that I ran, I had 2 opponents.
Are they all men?
I've had women.
Really?
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, that you've encouraged women to run.
Yeah. But I've had.
But you get what, like 60% of the vote, 58%?
Yes. This year, when we ran in the general election, I was actually the top vote getter for the entire county.
Really?
Yeah, I was very excited.
So you're popular out there.
Well, I don't know
Or down
popular,
there.
but
Well, people vote for you.
Yes, they do.
Wow.
I'm very honored to represent my county. I love my county.
When you ran, what was your understanding of the county clerk's position and the office? The responsibilities, those kinds of things.
I knew from the get-go that it was a lot of responsibility. What it all entailed was not exactly everything I knew. I knew more or less what it did. I didn't know all the depth of it. But I will tell you that now, starting my 3rd term, we are responsible for so many things. And the importance of that particular position kind of holds the county together in many ways. If the county clerk's position didn't exist, a lot of information that people use to settle disputes, to settle estates, to create a memory, to have proof of what has actually happened. If it weren't for that office, people wouldn't have the facts that they need to protect them with future interests.
You know, Arturo Guajardo mentioned the importance of data and documentation and having a record. He described it as, he was citing a book, but he said, for economic purposes. In other words, like, if you don't have this, you can't really be as economically stable or sturdy or well-founded. You see that in your work.
I do. Like I tell you, when I've gone to visit schools, I tell every child, there is a book that tells me the story of your life. And basically, we do have that book in the office for every individual that has gone through Cameron County. Whether they move far away or whether they come back, the book is there. And it's very simple to put things together because you start piecing all the information.
When we talked to Arturo Guajardo, it was in the context of preservation. So he described like this mountain of work.
It is a lot.
Digitizing and preserving.
It is a lot.
What is the story from Cameron County around preservation efforts since you've been there, maybe even that predate you?
I believe Mr. Rivera, who was before me, had started the program. Since I've been there, we've tried to speed it up and get more done. To date, we've done about, I'll tell you right now, we've done about 455 books, so we still have a lot of books. We actually have 18 books of those that have been preserved are actual census books from the 1800s. We are currently right now preserving health records from the 1800s. We have school records when the county had county schools. It is a vast undertaking because when you preserve these books, like Mr. Guajardo was telling you, you got to clean them, you got to get them out of the original book. I mean, your staff was in my office, they see how heavy the books are. The original books are about this thick and they're huge. You got to flip them over. Then they've got to take them apart and pull out all the paper. They clean them, removing all the tears, ironing out the corners when they take them to the preservation location. And they're actually cleaning it. They put some kind of acid-based liquid on them, soak them, clean them, dry, hang them to dry. They go through a process, like a manufacturing process, where they're hanged to dry. They dry. Then once they're dried, then they clean them, make sure everything's been removed, and then they go through a process of being scanned and then being sealed and then placed in a binding book that is water and fireproof prevented.
Wow. And so they've demonstrated that to you, or have you been to where they do it?
I actually have been through the whole process and seen it myself.
They're in your office?
It's done in Dallas. We have
So
a company.
you went to Dallas to see it?
Yes.
And who did you take with you?
I've taken my staff, my chief deputy. A lot of my staff has gone out there. I'm actually getting ready to invite either the county judge and a commissioner or 2 commissioners to go with me, because right now we're working on getting another part of our preservation done, but we're also working with, we applied for a grant under the ARPA funding to help us not only preserve the historic documents, but to continue preserving all documents that have not been scanned or digitized for the access of the public.
So we're seeing some images from your office.
Yes.
And so a second ago, you were actually poring over a book.
Yes.
And so the digitization process begins for you guys.
Those are the older books, the ones that you're seeing right now. Those are older books.
Yeah.
They're not part of the preservation, but we are working on trying to get funding for those to get preserved. You see, those are oil, gas, and mineral lease document records. That the older books were in that, probably in worse condition than that.
Wow.
Okay. Now these are the ones that Mr. Rivera preserved when he was there. Okay. From there, we're now up to 455 books, and we're still working on some more. These are other documents. These are old original ones that we have in those bound books. Those are all have been on video, scanned on microfilm. So we've got to preserve those as well.
What does your staff look like? How many people work under you?
We have about a staff of about 58 people working with us. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And they're all, like Arturo mentioned earlier, they're all deputized. So they have to, that deputization requires them to uphold the laws of Texas and those of the Constitution of the United States.
What did you do after high school? Getting back to your story here.
You see, look, those are our citizenship papers, the ones that you were seeing.
Yeah.
So those are the declarations when people would come from other countries and say,
So Pam, if you can get back to
I want to become a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
They're old books, those right there.
So, Pam was showing me this morning, and so just in reflecting on it, she said something that was really interesting. She said that she got this sense that Brownsville in the late 19th century was almost like an Ellis Island.
I think so. I don't think people have actually seen that, but some of the documents that I have personally looked at, looking through those books and looking at some of the stories of the birth certificates we have, the marriage licenses that we have, and when you review all that, you kind of get a sense of how Cameron County, Brownsville, was the beginning of how Texas history developed over the years. And every part of the county has an integral part of how they became part of that instrument to create the abundance in agricultural growth, the seafood industry, the Port of Brownsville, what it brought into this area, and what it continues to bring to not only this area, but how it impacts the rest of the United States.
So, I was telling Arturo that the reason that we got into some of this work was because, we had engaged two families in an oral history on the Underground Railroad. The families were very involved in it. They were both mixed race families, both men who had married a slave, one from Central Texas and one from Alabama. Although Central Texas, they came from Vermont and Louisiana, that sort of thing. But you have already shared with us, evidence of how, like this one bill of sale in 1853 of a slave named Susan, I think.
And a child.
And then apparently, like, there's Susan, who was sold in 1853, was then sold to somebody else thereafter, and then somebody else thereafter. And so it's hard to imagine that, right here in Cameron County in Brownsville, along the border, that slavery
was here or existed
here.
Yes.
But there's actual evidence in the county clerk's documents in Cameron County.
Yes.
Yeah. So now, when was it that you first learned of this, and then what was your reaction to that?
I actually learned about it when my first year in office, when I learned about the Preservation Project and where we were and what we started doing, and then starting to kind of piece together a little synopsis of what we actually did and what kind of record keeping we kept. So through that, I kind of had my staff, okay, let's find out what we have and what we're doing. So we started putting pieces together and writing a story about what we had. So when we go, for instance, I've gone to speak to the Cameron County Historical Association, present to them about our preservation project and how I'd like them to get involved with it. I've gone to talk to the Cameron County Geological Association because they want to know what kind of records we have, what kind of information we can help them when families come and do research. We've had people come from different parts of the United States to come and do research on families.
So when you were doing that early work in 2004, 2015, like who happened upon some of that language first? Like, who was it, you or was it one of your team members that said, "Hey, Sylvia, look at what I found"?
Well, one of my staff members told me, "Ma'am, we have a bill, or we have paperwork where it says there was slave sales." I was like, "Let me see, let me bring it out, let me see it." And so we started reading, and of course, these notes are all written in cursive.
Yeah.
So when I take those books and I take them to an elementary school today, kids cannot read cursive. If I take them to a middle school, they cannot read cursive because everything's text. So it's very hard for them to understand it. But when I read it to them and I tell them the year when it was signed, they're like, "That's old, ma'am. That's really old." Yes, it is. When we found that information, we read about, it doesn't say a last name, but it does mention in the bill of sale an African woman. It doesn't say where she's coming from, but I'm putting it together and thinking the early settlers of our area were coming through the ships. They were both steamboat captains. So they brought these people in and then they sold them. So that particular one was sold for about $120. And it was her and a female child aged 10. So along with those bills of sale, we see where at the end of the cycle, I believe Pam got this, we think that either she got her freedom and bought back her daughter, or the daughter got the freedom and bought back the mother. So there's, as the years progress, we see where one of them bought one of them. I still haven't pieced it together, but we've got very historical names in there. We've got Mr. King, who bought slaves. We have Mifflin Kennedy, who also bought slaves. Very interesting story with him and his wife. They were one of the first interracial marriages in our area. She was originally married to a colonel who was in the military who was Greek, and his name was Vidal, who ended up dying of cholera. And because they were married, she came from money. Her father was a governor with Spain. Petra Vidal was Petra Vela, viuda de Vidal Kennedy. And I say Kennedy because everybody says it's Kennedy, but it's actually one N, so it was pronounced Kennedy.
So the accent is on the second E, Kennedy?
Kennedy.
And so where'd you get that from?
I learned this from because the General Mifflin Kennedy was a Quaker. And so I met someone with who does, it's not Ancestry.com, it's another program that does geological, and told me that the Quakers pronounced the name, not Kennedy, they pronounced it Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, the Quakers were the leaders of the abolitionist movement. And so
To have a Quaker come into
Yes.
Brownsville as a steamboat captain and meet this beautiful, rich, wealthy, widowed Hispanic Spaniard woman and marry her, it was like the talk of the town.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then they became extremely wealthy. And then he died, and she was a very smart woman. She had several children with her first husband, became a widow. Her parents sent her back over here and told her, go over there and see if you can maybe be able to marry again, which was very important for families back then, was make sure that you stayed married because that brought you wealth and inheritance, right? So she did. She came down here and she met him, which was probably the oddest couple. She was very Catholic. He was a Quaker, very different bringings. But whatever they did, she convinced him, and they were married through the Catholic Church.
How do you see your office and the documents that you have as sources of historical education? I mean, you talked about how you take the books sometimes to school. So it seems like you see these kinds of documents, archival documents, as important textbooks from which to teach. Can you kind of like talk about that philosophy and maybe how you operationalize that philosophy?
You know, going to talk to the students at the different schools, and I've been invited to many schools across the county. When you go talk to them, children are very interested in learning. It's just how you teach them. So I'll say it again. When I tell them I have a book about your story in my library, they're like, they go like that, like, wow. Because they're not thinking that whatever they do is going to be of any importance. But I tell them, I can look at your birth certificate and I can find out who your mom and dad are. And then I can go and look at your mom and dad's birth certificate and I can find out who their parents were. And then I can look at your grandparents' birth certificate and find out who their parents were. And back from there, I can go back and go and search in the computer and start putting those names in. And I can find out something about you, whether you were related to somebody, whether someone you know came from somewhere, or what city they came from. I can learn a lot. And they're like, I said, you all think the internet is powerful. It's even more powerful when you got the history books to prove all that information. They like it. They enjoy it. I think most importantly to them is the fact that they didn't understand where they live and how important that part of where they are was an integral part of the history of this country and an integral part of the state of Texas. And so to me, when you talk about the King Ranch, to me, I feel that the King Ranch, basically, the story of it started in Cameron County. The story of Clayburgh County, Kennedy County, all those little counties as they built up started over here. This particular lady that I'm telling you about, her and her husband ended up moving to Hidalgo County. and they had a big old ranch there. When he died, he left her with a lot of money that then she sold her cattle, her sheep, everything to Texas Cattle Association. And from there, they created more land and more properties that they acquired through them. But he became a business partner with Mr. King.
I have a book about your story. That's your quote. Mm-hmm. I have a book about your story. And how do you...
I have a book about you in my library.
About you in my library. And the library is the county clerk's office.
Yes. Uh-huh.
That's a great quote.
It'll tell me the day you were born. It'll tell me the day you get married. Mm-hmm. It'll tell me the day you bought a house. It'll tell me if you got in any trouble at any time. It'll tell me that. And the day that you pass away, it'll tell me the end has come to your story.
Wow.
And I close that book and I file it. So when Arturo was telling you we are the keeper of records, we are definitely the keeper of records.
Sylvia, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
And for sharing not only the story of the county clerk's office and framing it. I have a book about you in my library. That's beautiful framing. But also about sharing your own personal story.
Oh, thank you.
The story of your mother. Such a delightful story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the May 2023 edition of Museum Pláticas. So we will see you again in June with another round of interesting stories through our own Pláticas. So today, just think about what we learned.
A lot.
You know, the county clerks and how consequential the county clerks are in really doing what you said, Celia. I have a book about you in my library. Wow. So that's the truth. And so I think we have access, and more access, you know, to the world, really, and not only to friends of the museum, but to anybody. So everybody take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again next month for another edition of Museum Pláticas.